Welcome to Agile Data tutorial, session number 2. In this session, in my previous session, we have defined the requirements for our internal API, and we said this should be the syntax. This is a very clear and simple for developers to understand, and it needs to map onto the following database. But now we need to start implementing our requirements. So in order to build that, we will be using Agile Data Framework. And I have created an empty folder over here. And so we'll be installing Agile Data. And currently we are on version 0.5, as well as it does pull in some dependencies. Not many, but all the code is built by the same bunch of authors. So it's not a stable version yet. It's still work in progress, but it's pretty decent, allows us to do quite a lot already. So if you look at our folder now, it has created vendor, and then there is a standard composer stuff. Okay. And that's going to be my editor. I will be using a file called, so I suppose I'll start with just test PHP. Oops. Okay, test PHP, and what I want to achieve in here, just give me one moment, is I want to establish a connection. Also, I need to be able to define a couple of models. So let me create a folder called src, where I'll be storing my models, and that's all we have at the moment. So yes, and in order for automatic loading to work, I need to define a location for my namespace, which I can do by doing autoload, and then the namespace will be called let's call it my, and yes, we'll have to define PSR4, I suppose, and that goes inside src close. Okay, we're good so far. Now in my test file, I'd like to include autoload vendor autoload, and then I'll create a new model, so the new class equals system. So that's it. Hopefully it will try to load this file, and I'll do echo hi inside this class. Try to execute it. Let's see if it works. Yes. Should use my prefix. Okay, so it tried to load this file, which is great. And here I can define my class, model, system, like this. And our code should work now. Perfect. It does work, it doesn't do anything, which is fine, but the loading works. As my next step, I need to extend this from k4 data model, which is a universal class for models, and I need to make sure that it actually loads, and there we go. So that's working fine. I could also define it in a use keyword, but it doesn't really matter. So my model is created, which is great. As a next step, I'd like to define a connection, and just to give you a little bit, little peek inside my database. So I have a couple of tables over here generated from my my schema. I can also bring up the schema over here. So that's the schema. Okay. And I have one system which ID I have to change to 10. So I will be trying to load this one. Under contact info ID points to the contact info, which has address of 8th Street, my country, and the country ID is UK. Although there are more countries. Right, so the data is in order, so we should be able to create a connection to our database first. And for that, we need to create a persistence. This is how we create persistence in Agile data. So we using the class persistence, connecting to the database. This should correspond to the name of our database, which is data primaire. And then when I create the model, I will be using a DB. We should have a working test. Okay, and it says we need to create a property table, which is fine. Okay, table equals system. All right. So previously, not having table was fine, but because now we try to associate it with the persistence SQL in this case, it starts complaining. All right. I'll show you another trick. So I'm just going to comment that for now and execute this. And you see the exception is popping up, but this is default on-call exception. That's the default way how PHP outputs exception. Agile data actually uses exceptions which are which have a little bit more information than regular ones. So we're going to catch them over here, and we're gonna output them. Okay, let's see what changed. Okay, now we have exceptions, we catch them, and then we're using an actually internal method to fetch the exception details with a lot of text. So let me show you what's happening in here and compare to the default output format. So normally it says uncaught exception, which you see also in here. That's the exception. It highlights the message, which says object table must be specified for a model, but additionally you can see a couple of parameters in here. So model is actually passed as a parameter, and you see it's my model system. So you know this information is not appearing anywhere in here, but it's supplied. It can't be part of the error message because God knows what happens with the message. It might be available to the user. We don't want him to see any additional information which might be sensitive. Also, we have our debug trace over here, and as you can see, some of the methods are highlighted in yellow. So ADD, yeah, it says in model 167, is the same in here. Yeah, we have ADD class, but it highlighted this construct in red. So it says on the test PHP line number 7. That's probably it tries to estimate where the error actually happened. So it highlights in red and also shows us the parameters which were specified. Yeah, so we passed in a persistence SQL inside our code to the construct, and probably something, this execution over here triggered the error. Okay, so that's how we get colorful exceptions. And I'm gonna load the system, run again, and we're good. Now, my next test over here would be, so we get the system, we need load system number 10, and then echo, let's say dump. Right, so we everything we get from the system, which is going to want to output, and let's see how it works. It actually worked quite well. It did load the system with ID 10, and it dumped all the fields, and because we only have one field, it just gives us 10 back. So we need to define more fields. Function init. Okay. So in here we can now define a couple of fields. There are no fields inside the system we can define, but there is a contact information. At this point, we can make we can decide how we'd like to work with this contact info, and because we will have to import 3 fields and one relation, so 4 fields in total, I would like to go ahead and implement it using join. Not just join, but I'm going to be left join or weak join. So the system joins to contact info. Okay, like this. I can actually go ahead and try. This will result in error. Yes, so we get the opportunity to look at this wonderful errors. So that's original exception, period exception, column not found, unknown column, system.contact info ID in the on clause. But this error was encapsulated in Agile data exception, which additionally gave us the query. That's the query that was used, and we also can see which model generated this error and what were the conditions on the model. We also see that it happened when we tried to load record number 10. And the bottom line here is that when we define the relation, we did it incorrectly. So by default, the system will assume there is a contact ID field, contact info ID field inside the system table, but that's not the case. So we have to do a reverse join and saying that there is a system ID field inside contact info table, and that's the case. Yeah, contact info has a oh no, sorry, that's wrong. We're correct, but the field is called owner contact info ID. So this should work now. Okay, it did work, but again we only got the field 10, which is fine for now. Let's see what we can do. Address 1, 2, 3. I will use a more verbose format. Fields. And we'll have address 1. Okay, we have 3 address fields which we are importing. Let's see if it will work for us. Right. So that's a PHP file error. That's why it wasn't caught. Again, yeah. So that's because Agile data is still in beta. There are a lot of cases which are not properly handled or validated. And essentially, what it does say to us is that degree of fields. Let's try to do one field at a time. Okay, and that works. So I'm not going to group the multiple fields one by one. Apparently there's some bug in Agile data, so we'll just have to add them like this. And yeah, this is actually data from the database, but it is stored inside my current table. Also, I'm thinking that maybe it shouldn't be a weak join. Like every time we create a system, it should probably be a regular join. The difference between weak join and regular join is weak join protects records over here. So if we add a system or delete the system, it actually will not touch the contact information. But in our case, we needed to probably if we're adding a new system, it should add contact information as well. So that's it. Next, we need a country. And for that, we need to define a relation. So our system has one, or specifically the J table has one country. Now at this point, I'll have to use the namespace my country. Country ID. Okay, that's how I define my country. Let's see if it will break, because my country is not defined. It actually didn't break. It figured out the country ID is 0, which is good, right? But we also wanted in our example to have a field called country. So we'll have to do the field country, which needs to correspond to the name inside the country model. At this point, we'll have an error, essentially, which says my model country is not found. So we'll have to create that. Same code pretty much. And the table changed to country, and then this. Oh yes, and the name of the class should be model country. Okay, and now we have a column called country, which is UK in fact. So looking at our requirement number 1, so we should be able to load system by 10. We should see address 1. It should be imported correctly in UK. And the last term of condition was that it needs to be on a one single query, one select query over here. And let's just look into that. To get the query, we'll have to do system and we can do this, and that's our query. Yeah, it's okay. So what's happening here is actually a query for not for a specific ID, but just query in general. Anyway, so let's look at this query. Let's analyze a little bit. So select system ID, right? Obviously, then it figure out that we're joining it with some other entity, which it decided to alias as C. And the subquery over here from system, which is left join contact info as C. Yeah, that's the join, and that's the subquery from the country. So all of that query is generated automatically. We didn't write any of that. The system just came up, but that's a single query, and it does load address 1, country, and everything we actually need. So at this point, we have completed the requirement number 1, and in my next video I'll look inside requirement number 2.